We're going to go ahead and reconvene in open session. To our guests and visitors, we ran a little behind last meeting of the year, so we had a lot of discussion, so thank you for your patience. I'd like to start with commissioners' reports and comments. Commissioner Baker, would you begin?
Yes, this past week I did attend the Christmas banquet with our fire police down at Shepherd's, Shepherd Spring. They just offered a really nice event, thanking all of their volunteers for everything that they do all year long for Washington County. And it's pretty notable that our fire police are all volunteers, and the hundreds or tens of thousands of dollars that they save our taxpayers every year. So I just want to thank for that invitation to be at that event.
Wayne?
Yes, I also attended the Fire Police Christmas banquet, and it was a very nice event, well attended. Members from across the county were in attendance, and Dr. Hayes, I think, was also in attendance, as was our county administrator. This being our last meeting of the year, would just like to thank our county staff for a very productive year. I think this past year, we've had a few challenges. Probably what sticks out the most is some of the storm damage we had in South County, which I know involved efforts from multiple departments to make that recovery and everything involved with that as expedient as possible. And I know it's something that we're still working on, that will go until next year. We had some staff changes and we had some commissioner changes, so this was a big year. And I thank everyone for their patience and their hard work with the county, and I'm looking forward to 2019.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Wagner?
Yeah, I want to welcome everybody, and again, great staff at Washington County. I hope everybody has a great Christmas and holiday. Also, for the commissioners, I would like maybe next year we could get something started on local preference, which basically is trying to keep, it'll take a House bill, I seem to think, but basically keep some of our businesses and companies in Washington County, give them a little bit of edges to be able to work in Washington County and not have to go up against companies from out of state. So that's just something I wanted to see. Maybe we get started on next year.
I think that's a good idea if we can have that added.
Yeah, we've
as an
had some
agenda
discussion.
item.
Good. That could be, go ahead, and I'll add that in a second here. Go ahead, Court.
I just want to thank all the employees for welcoming me as a new commissioner and having open doors while I'm going around trying to figure out what's going on and getting lost in the building. So just thank you very much, and I'm excited for 2019 and beyond.
Thank you. One of the things I was going to bring up was our goals. Some of our individual goals that we could work over the holidays, that we could formulate, put together, and have a discussion on our agenda for goals. And the preference could be one of our goals or discussion points, if you all would agree. So over the holidays, perhaps maybe use that sheet that was in our binder that was given to us as the new board to form some of your goals over the holidays. So I'd like for your support on that. Second, I also attended the fire police meeting. The jobs that they do, and they put themselves in jeopardy protecting those who are responding to emergencies, to get to know them and see them, that the effort that they put forth, they put themselves in jeopardy when they respond. So it was a very nice dinner to be able to socialize and understand the efforts that they put forth. One other thing I've talked to you most about, we've received a letter request, and I hate to do it in comments time, so if we had another meeting this year, I would do it in a later meeting, but I'd like to see if the commissioners would consider hiring Bruce Bariano as our government relations consultant in Annapolis for this upcoming session. We have used Mr. Bariano in the past, and I'd like to open it up for a quick discussion and possibly a vote. Gentlemen?
Basically a lobbyist, correct?
Yes.
How long has the board had him retained?
3, 4.
It's been a number of years. I can't tell you with specificity, but it has been the last couple of years. I can tell you from personal experience that it is useful having someone who is local in Annapolis and can show up for hearings when there are hearings on bills that affect the county, not only the county's specific bills, but also bills of general interest that may have some particular impact on county government or county government operations. And it is useful having somebody there who can appear on our behalf at sometimes short notice.
Commissioner Klein, do you have a dollar amount in
think
mind? Because I believe our Community Lobbying Coalition, we upped our contribution to that.
Yeah, I think
Group
he asked for
from
the
5 to
same fee as last year.
It was
I think
$10,000
it's
that I
10,000
saw
it's in
somewhere.
there.
Yeah, I'm reading the letter right
I
now.
think we all received a letter last week or Monday on that.
So how much are we providing to the lobbyists that we've already retained? How many lobbyists do we need?
This is the same one, I believe.
No, we retained lobbyists
So
through
we have a
our
lobbying coalition.
coalition.
Well, why I would separate them, the lobby coalition is, their lobbyists that we're supporting is representing a larger interest of Washington County. Mr. Bariano has always been our specific lobbyist for individual issues, supporting us in that. And one of the reasons I would like to support this is with Commissioner Barr no longer being reelected, his 12+ years of presence down in Mako and representing Washington County on the front line of many of these bills is no longer there. And I'm sure court will begin a very vigorous role in that as our Mako representative. But with 4 more years of Larry Hogan and having our own personal representative as our lobbyist, as our consultant, I think would be important this year with the absence of Mr. Barr.
Well, we have, I don't know how many senators and delegates down there that represent Washington County. We already have a lobbyist with our coalition. We have staff that frequently visits Annapolis. I'm not going to support it. It's $10,000. How much do we provide to the other lobbyist that represents the coalition?
We provide 10,000.
In response to the delegates, many of them have supported this suggestion in the past and are in favor of this at the time. But I appreciate respect your opinion.
So I'm a no.
I think with our increased contribution to the Community Lobbying Coalition, I think, personally, I think we put our faith in them that our goals will be accomplished. I have no doubt that Governor Hogan cares about Western Maryland and will look out for us. And I think we have hopefully an inroad with former Senator Chris Shank in that regard. So I think we stick with our lobbyists that way.
Gentlemen?
I have just a quick question. We said we increased the lobbying coalition, so what did it go from? What was
5
it?
to 10.
Went from 5 to 10?
Yeah, last year we had 2 lobbyists, and I think we provided,
Each one was 5 last year.
and personally, I think Washington County, all of our partners and all of our coalition, we're getting along better than we've ever gotten along in my 12 years as county commissioner, and I'm going to put all of my trust into our lobbying coalition and the lobbyists that they recommended for us to go with.
I do know Delegate Quarterman called me in support of, I'm blanking on his name right now,
Mr. Bariano.
Mariano, in support of him saying that he would definitely benefit the county for having him. So I want to make sure that's pointed out.
Mr. Wagner?
You know, with the current government in Annapolis and our delegation, and they seem to support this person, Barry Elmore. So, yeah, $10,000 is a substantial amount to pay somebody if everybody's read the task that he claims to accomplish. I think $10,000 might be a good investment for a year. That's what the contract is, a year, correct?
1 year.
Is for a year to see how much, if any, benefits we reap from that 10,000. It could be quite a bit more in financial aid coming to Washington County. It seems like the county attorney endorsed it. I'm sort of flying blind here because I wasn't here last year, but I think I would support it and reevaluate it, but I'd want to see what actually has been accomplished in a year.
Well, first, thank you all for your honest input. Would anyone like the motion to move forward with this hiring of Mr. Bariano?
I'll make the motion to move forward.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
Any motion? There's a first and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 No.
No. 3-2. The hiring of Bruce Bariano passes. First, a heartfelt thank you to each and every one of you for your honest and open opinion. Very much appreciated. Thank you. Reports from county staff is next. Who's first?
I'll just go with my sheet of paper. And if you need further information, I'll have to dig through my files, okay? Deb Payton, Director of Health and Human Services. I am here to ask for the approval to hire a county attorney, Kirk Downing. This would be at a grade 20, step 12, $127,858.
Okay, hearing that, I believe that's being above a grade 13. We need an official vote on that, correct? Any comments before I ask for a motion?
Motion to support?
There we go. I have a first.
Second.
A second. I have a first and a second to hire Mr. Downey. Is there any discussion?
Great choice.
Thank you.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, 5-0. Congratulations.
Thank you.
County Attorney Downey.
Thank you. I certainly appreciate your confidence and look forward to working with you in this new role for the betterment of the county. Thank you.
Thank you. Further staff report.
Yes, there's further ones. We also would like to place Miss Allison Hartshorn in the position of Grant Manager in the Office of Grant Management. It is a grade 11, step 1, $43,826.
Now, for clarity, do we need an official vote or just a consensus?
From my understanding, under a grade 12 and below does not require, and this is a grade 11.
It is a grade 11,
Yes.
For the record's sake, we just have a consensus for the hiring.
right.
All those agree in a consensus?
Agreed.
See 5 nods. Thank you very much.
Okay, there's also 2 clean county technicians. These are a grade 9, step 1, $37,565,000. We would like to bring in Mr. Michael Klein into that position.
And for the record, he's a K and not related to me, right?
Yes, sir, for the
But when you
record.
say them, they sound the same.
Yes, they do.
Again, it's the last hiring practice. This is under a grade, and he needs a consensus.
Okay.
Okay, consensus, 5 nods.
All right, the next person is we have 2, another Clean County technician, grade 9, step 1, $37,565 in the Division of Environmental Management. We would like to place Mr. Alan Wetzel into that position.
Okay, board, the same policy. Do I see a consensus? 5 nods.
Okay. The next position is an emergency call taker specialist. This is a grade 11, step 1, $43,826. We would like to place Mrs. Brittany Canterbury into that position. This is a position at emergency management.
Once again, I have a consensus to move forward with that hiring. 5-0 nods.
Again, in emergency communications, emergency management, this is a position that is a grade 8, step 1, $34,278. We would like to place Ms. Joni Betts into this position.
Commissioners, same thing. All in agreement? Consensus? Agreed. Yes.
The next position is a business support specialist. This position is a grade 12, step 1. You heard about this last closed session. It was $47,341. We would like to place Carmen Harbaugh into this position.
And this is grade,
12. It is a grade 12.
okay, again, we
Step
just need a
1.
consensus. All in favor? C5, please.
One more, and that's it. This is the Director of Plan Review and Permitting and Zoning Administrator in the Department of Planning and Permitting. It is a grade 18, step 1, $75,088. We would like to place Mr. Ashley Holloway into this position.
Are you hearing it's a grade 18? I would like an official vote. Commissioners, do I hear a motion to approve?
I'll make the motion.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion on this position? Hearing none, Call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
5-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very well presented. Thank you, Debbie.
Commissioners, thank you for the, the choices made today. With those, we will be able to begin to fill the emergency services call takers rather immediately rather than wait till January 8th. So thank you very much for that. And Mr. Holloway will be coming from out of state. He'll be available as early as January 7. We will be working with Mr. Lung in a part-time capacity for a very short period to serve until he is able to arrive, if that suits your satisfaction.
All right, for information purposes, we're heading towards an 11 o'clock public hearing, but I don't want to eliminate any staff reports, including yours, Mr. Slocum. So is any other staff here that would like to come forward? Please do. Mr. Baker left his timer here, so there you go.
Good morning, Commissioners. Danielle Weaver, Public Relations and Marketing Director. I just wanted to make you aware of a MEMA spotlight that is going to be coming out in the next couple days. It highlights the collaboration between FirstNet, AT&T, the Lieutenant Governor's Office, emergency services, the Sheriff's Department, and our public relations team. So I won't read this or go through it, but it highlights us being the first to use FirstNet in the state of Maryland.
Okay, any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. Next staff report.
I have a handout. I want to go ahead and pass out quickly before I.
That's mine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. Susan Buchanan, Director, Office of Grant Management. I'm following up on a presentation last week regarding the local support for the Black Fly Control Program. As you may recall, the Black Fly Control Program was implemented in FY18 in Washington County as a pilot program. The Maryland Department of Agriculture administers the program and sprays 6 locations in southern Washington County with bacterial insecticide to combat the black fly. The cost of continuing the program in the remaining months of fiscal year 19 and a full fiscal year in FY20 is, for the total program, would be $120,000 for 3 sprayings in spring of FY19, and then a FY20, a full year, would consist of 6 sprayings, April, May, June, July, August, and September, with a total cost of $240,000. Last week, Catherine Blass, who is the legislative aide to Delegate Parrott, along with Judy Warner, requested local support to encourage state funding for the full cost of the program for the remainder of FY19 and 20. They requested a suggested amount of 20% of the program cost, but then did indicate that even a 10% contribution may be successful in securing the state participation. For your awareness, the cost of supporting the 10% of the program would be $12,000 in FY19 and $24,000 in FY20. That would be a total cost of $36,000 for all 9 applications.
What was the first year's contribution?
The first year would be $12,000. That would be for 10% of the cost of the 3 sprayings that would be in April, May, and June.
And the second one was?
The second would be a full year in FY20, so that would be the 6 sprayings, April, May, June, July, August, and September, which would be at the same percentage, $24,000. And the $36,000 would be the total support that would give a full year of the programming, and then the remaining of FY19.
Calling for a vote of support for this at this time?
The letter that I passed around, if you chose to make a formal vote today, last week I think there was an informal support. I could just mention that the hotel rental tax program would be consistent with this type of expense as far as allowability because of the impact on the recreation, tourism in that vicinity.
There was talk about the, was it the moths? Is there money left in that account?
The Gypsy Moth program, there probably will be. We normally get billed once a year for that program. Last year, we were billed about $7,500. We have a $10,000 budget for that program, so there could be potentially $2,500 remaining. Yes.
Does that project run year to year too?
The Gypsy Moth program is run every year, and we get billed each year for surveying. The surveying costs, is something that's done annually, and that determines whether we need to spray.
So, pardon the interruption. So would savings, best not to use that savings and go ahead and use hotel motel since the Gypsy Moth is also recurring? Does that savings carry over in your budget, our budget?
If we have that savings at the end of the year, it will go to fund balance, so it will help the bottom line.
So what I'm hearing, commissioners are probably in support of this. It's just designating funding source.
I've got one question with this is what I want to make sure that we're clear with this letter. If we are going to fund this, I don't want to fund this unless the state is also going to be funding it, because if we're putting money into an account, I want this letter to say that we will contribute up to a certain amount depending on the state's funding, because if they come back and we put $18,000 into an account that does nothing.
Is that why we're committing only to 2 years?
That's why the
We're only committing if the state
right.
contributes.
We could put additional language within the letter if you.
I would like that additional language in the letter, making sure that.
For that request, could then we see another copy?
Yes.
And then I would also put in that letter that we're not putting a dollar amount. I would make it a percentage of what the state funding is going to be. And if we agree on 10 or 15%, I think we up to a certain amount, because if they come in and say, hey, I'm only putting in $90,000, then there's no reason for us to be funding it $20,000. So I would like a percentage amount, if we could agree on a percentage amount up to a certain dollar figure.
Okay.
All right, do you have direction on that to proceed later?
Yes.
Was there any exploration on, exploring a Frederick County team-in? Was there anybody?
Actually, we did look into the locations where the spraying is all going to be done are all located within Washington County and not in Frederick County. But we did incorporate that into that letter that we still would be hopeful to see, although not making a formal request because it is a program that's only being implemented within our county, that we are encouraged that Frederick County could contribute if they so chose because of the indirect benefit because of the proximity. That's what that
Hearing that,
language.
then we'll await your new draft of the letter.
There's no votes. You just want me to bring forward a new draft based upon a percentage?
Based on that language, I think
I'd be willing to, because I'm assuming you're going to need this, you want this letter before session.
It would be, I think that Delegate Parrott's office wanted to have it in the beginning of.
we could call for a vote based on those conditions. Is that appropriate?
We know what the changes are we want. Yeah.
Okay.
Then I'll make the motion according to the previous changes, making the dollar, make it a percentage based upon the state funding up to, what was it, 24,000? So it would be.
Total was 36 for 12 years.
You could say a total of 36 for 2 years, or.
Yeah. So I'm comfortable with that.
So you want a percentage and a dollar amount?
Yeah, percentage up to a max. So let's say for some reason they put a larger amount on there, we're only going to fund this dollar amount.
For purpose, we had a first, we need a second to continue discussion. Second.
Second.
We can go back to the.
Is the language going to say 36,000? Is that what we're going? Or are we finishing out one fiscal year and going into another? We're just going to put the language as 36,000.
I'm going to defer to the CFO. Is it going to be better to do it two separate?
We can figure out the wording. I think that it would be appropriate to say 10% or 12,000 for fiscal year 19 and 10% or up to 24,000 for fiscal year 2020.
We are acknowledging we support this program.
Then I'm.
Okay, I have a first and a second. Call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, 5-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Pardon me, President Klein. The funding source for this program was determined to be hotel rental funds. Is that correct?
That's fine. Okay.
Yes.
We're closing in on 11 o'clock public hearing, but I do not want to be rude to our audited financial statements. Do we have time to squeeze that in before 11? I don't want to diminish the importance of that.
Yeah, that's
Great. Fine, let's move forward then, please. Come forward, thank you. Please introduce yourself and welcome to our meeting today, sir.
Well, good morning. Good morning, everyone. I'm Chris Lehman. I'm with SB and Company. I was the engagement partner on this year's audit. And let's see if this will work. I will keep it brief in the respect of time, but if you have questions, just please stop me, because I do want to make this informative. This slide here talks about what we were engaged to perform. So we were engaged to perform an audit of the June 30, 2018 financial statements of the county as well. It's a little hard for me to read up there, so let me pull up my slide. The county is also subject to a federally mandated single audit. That's an audit of grant programs and spending of those programs during the fiscal year. Any entity that spends over $750,000 per year of federal funds is required to have that single audit. There's also two 990s that we prepare. They're tax-exempt tax forms filled out for the golf course and the agriculture center. There's no tax liability. It's just more of an informative compliance procedure. There's other state-mandated requirements that the county has as far as getting an audit of the agricultural land transfer tax. There's a landfill report that we opine on, as well as fire and rescue and 911 procedures. In addition, there's also specific procedures we do at the detention center to look at the internal controls there, as well as filing with the 990. There's a state charitable registration. The UFR is a report filed with the state upon completion of the financial statements. And lastly, the data collection form is filed once the single audit is issued. Our summary of the procedures we've performed: we've issued an unmodified opinion on the financial statements. That's the best opinion we could give under professional standards. That says that your financial statements are reasonably free of material misstatement. We did not discover any instances of fraud. A financial statement audit is not a fraud audit, but we are required to have a healthy skepticism that fraud could be perpetrated by anyone at any time. We didn't identify any material weaknesses in the internal controls. We received the full cooperation of management, so any questions that we asked, records that we requested to obtain audit evidence, we received adequate answers, adequate backup for those transactions. The biggest standard change, and really this hasn't impacted the county as significantly as it's impacted a lot of other governments, but GASB 75 basically changes the way that the OPEB liability is calculated and recorded on the entity-wide financial statements. If any of you are familiar with the pension standard that changed a couple of years, basically GASB's gotten away from the model of funding an ARC to basically looking at the total value of benefits that have been promised to current and retirees, and basically it's an actuarial calculation to discount that total liability and subtract that against any fiduciary assets that are saved in the trust today, or at that point in time of the audit. And actually there was a restatement for the implementation of this standard, which was required by GASB. It reduced opening net position by roughly $5 million, but the county did end up with an asset at the end of the fiscal year. So there's not a lot of governments in the position to have an OPEB asset. So not as significant for you guys as other places, but just that's kind of the biggest change from an accounting pronouncement. Also, we didn't have any audit entries, so we didn't have to make any corrections to the information within the general ledger, which just speaks to the quality of the books that are maintained throughout the year. And it's not like it takes the year-end audit to kind of clean up the numbers and have them presentable. just to kind of hit on a couple other slides. Do you have any questions so far? Because I know I'm going kind of fast. Okay.
Is that pretty rare not to have audit entries? That's pretty rare, isn't it?
It depends. I mean, it's common to find adjustments, but it depends on the control environment. So this slide I was going to highlight here, and I know it's kind of small on the screen here, but we look at the control environment, and that's looking at the there's 5 interrelated components: the control environment, risk assessment, information and communication, control activities, and monitoring. And we look at that through the audit process. We look at the key processes and what are the controls from, hiring someone to paying them and getting that expense within the financial statements, whether it's revenue, expense transactions. And from our testing from the environment and those specific key controls, we concluded that the environment was effective during the period under audit. If it was ineffective, that's where you typically would have material weaknesses, journal entries, because then management isn't able to get the numbers reported properly within the financial statements.
Can I ask a question on
Yes.
this slide? I believe it was sometime last year, staff had reported to the commissioners that we had a loan of $250,000 that didn't receive board approval for a project at our landfill. And I'm wondering where does that tie into your assessment?
Well, what we look at it from the financial statement perspective is the transactions that hit the books are those accurately recorded. So the loan was accurately recorded. I just don't know the specifics of the approval level on that specific transaction.
Wouldn't that fall under control activities?
Yeah, so if we were looking at, because we look at different types of controls. So as far as like an authorization, that could fall under the activity. Yep. So aside from those items, I did.
Also, back to his point.
Yeah.
Do you look at when the check was written and when it was cashed or anything like that?
Yeah. Now, of course, we sample because we can't test every single transaction that occurs at the county level. So we do sampling techniques, but we would look at, from the origination, whether there's a contract, purchase order, we would look at it through invoicing, through also cashing the check. So we would follow that transaction through from the origination to it actually hitting an expense and being paid through the books. So that is included within the scope. But again, of course, it's sampling because we can't look at every transaction. We'd be here. You couldn't afford to pay us that much to look at every single transaction.
Was that a transaction you were aware of?
I know we were aware of it when it came up at that point in time.
How can we be sure that we have the proper procedures in place to make sure that it doesn't happen again?
Well, because what we look at is there's always going to be exceptions. So I can't say that every single transaction's going to be processed properly because exceptions will occur. But what we look at is there a system in place that is designed to either, we look at preventive controls, we look at detective controls, and is there adequate design of those processes? Are there people in place that have the knowledge of what those controls are? And are they adequately, trained and knowledgeable where they could catch an error? And that goes into our system of controls to say, do we think those things are in place? If you had someone that we thought was incompetent, which is not the case, what I'm saying, if there was an incompetence concern or a way to circumvent the controls that we saw that you could work around the control or, management override of controls, things like that we consider. So I can't say that everything's going to be right 100% of the time, but we do look at what are the ways to get around the controls, and has management considered those in their control process? Because at the end of the day, management determines what controls they put in place to give them comfort whether or not the number is hitting the general ledger or getting in there accurately.
So overall, you're saying that our policy and procedures regarding the transactions are, we have appropriate controls to minimize anything like that happening.
Yes.
Again,
The last piece, and I won't go through every one of these slides, but this would just be, and of course you can't read that on the screen, but just if we had anything of a negative nature that we had to bring to your attention, like I had mentioned, we were not aware of any fraud. We didn't have any material weaknesses in the internal control environment. If there was anything that was, unsupported transactions or things of that nature, I'd be required to bring that to the commissioner's attention. So there's really nothing of a negative nature I'd have to bring to your attention through the audit process. Sorry, I went over a little bit.
All right, you're fine.
Well, from reading this, it looks like I see a lot of effectives and no red flags anywhere. Commissioner Kiefer had a good point. I think you answered that. So it looks like
Well,
a
it
real good
speaks
report.
to management. I mean,
It does.
And I would just like to take this opportunity to also thank my staff, who I have some here today, for their awesome work and everything that they do at the end of the year. It's a lot, and they do a great job. So thank you.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Thank you for your
Thank you.
presentation. First, I must apologize. I skipped over citizens' participation. Please forgive me. I've informed everybody to my left and right to elbow me. I'll do that again in the future. So is there anyone here for citizens' participation? All right, seeing none. I do have to apologize to staff. I have 2 staff reports. Ms. Rader, may I allow them to come first? Is that okay? So are there any more, Mr. Hayes, do you have a staff report? Okay, thank you for my indulgence in skipping over. Krista?
I do. I have a Washington County Electrical Board of Examiners and Supervisors appointment. They are requesting consensus or vote to reappoint Robert Pichera as the Master Electrician Designee, who would serve a third 2-year term through September 30th of 2020 on this board. Mr. Pichera has served 2 terms already on the board, and the board fully supports his appointment.
Okay, hearing that, is there a motion to approve? Motion. A second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Approved.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Do you have any of the? Oh, Sarah, I forgot you. Pardon me. The elbow moved around the table. Thank you
That's
very much.
okay,
Please
no
begin.
problem. I have passed out a letter addressed for,
Okay. Okay.
a letter addressed for the board president of the Maryland Theater. You have it in front of you, based on the decision that was made last week for the contribution of $1 million. What I'm asking for today is your concurrence on the letter. If you find anything that you would like to change about it, I'm happy to change or modify it in any way. Also, in addition, I wanted to mention that unless otherwise directed, staff will provide the $1 million in funding from the capital reserves. So that will be a funding source for those funds. And in addition, as directed by the board, staff has moved forward in setting up a meeting with the Maryland Theater scheduled tentatively for January 7th to discuss further options.
Okay, so you're asking for a motion to approve the letter. Okay, hearing that, is there a motion to approve?
Motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. 5-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Slocum.
Thank you,
Your name
President
right
Klein.
here, real big.
And Commissioners. First of all, congratulations to Mr. Downey as the county attorney. And moving forward to keep his office running smoothly, which reports directly to the commissioners, of course. But I'd like to request that our HR department be allowed, if Mr. Downey concurs, that we hadn't talked about this, so I understand you're looking at me, but I think this will be helpful to request that the deputy county attorney position be advertised with the commissioner's approval to try to keep things moving, but that's certainly to your wish, if that's.
That would be appropriate. Appreciate it.
That's something we just need a consensus to move forward with. Is it okay for everyone?
Yep.
All right, consensus to move forward to hire the deputy county administrator. Thank you.
That will then allow the advertisement process to start before January 8th. So thank you very much. The second and final thing I have for you, Commissioners, is in introduction, I had mentioned a retreat without retreating, but actually advancing a strategic coach, strategic leadership organization, which would speak to the Commissioners as well as senior staff and others regarding strategy over the next 4 years. I have a scope because the dollar value requires us to get quotes, and the scope has Novak Consulting was at 22.5. That's 22,500. Alternative Solutions was at 20,500 plus travel, and the Jinx perspective was at 12,500, considerably less. And the Jinx perspective did work directly with the United Way and had very good experience there. That is a reference point. So what we'd like to do is program for January, sometime at the latest early February, for that strategic planning to occur with the board, and then subsequently with staff, if that's okay with the board.
Looking for a vote to move on that?
Where would the funds from this come from? Is it just?
The funds could come from a number of sources, the contingency, but I will refer to Sarah on what her recommendation would be for something like this.
And I can get back to the board on that. I can take a look at what we have going on in the departments. Of course, the contingency is always an option if there is no other source.
Yeah.
Commissioners, you want to decide on this today, or what's your thoughts? Any discussion?
I think the Board of Ed did something similar, only at the board level.
They stayed in
and
Washington
management level.
County, yeah.
I like the concept. I like the idea of getting together, and this could help us over the next 4 years, maybe set a clear path.
Well, it also is in-house, right? Correct, Rob? It's in-house, no travel expenses, no hotel expenses, and they come to us, so that saves a ton of money if we didn't have to go to Annapolis or somewhere.
I will support this as well. Professional training from doctors, lawyers, police officers, firemen, elected officials are good.
Indian chiefs.
And there you go. And it would only make us better servants to the people. So if I could hear a motion to support that request from County Administrator, if I hear a motion and a second.
I'll second.
And I think we're going to be alerted to the funding options shortly, but based on that, I have first and a second motion to approve.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. 5-0. Thank you, Mr. Administrator. Thank you.
Thank you, Dirce.
Okay. Seeing no more staff, citizens participation out. I guess Ms. Rader, you're on. Thank you for your patience.
Good morning. My name's Lindsay Rader. I'm with Funkin Bolton in Baltimore, and we serve as bond counsel to the county. We're here today before you for a public hearing for the proposed issuance of revenue bonds by the county, the proceeds of which will be loaned, if you approve the issue, to Diakon Lutheran Social Ministries, which I'll refer to as either Diakon or the borrower, and used by Diakon to refinance some obligations that the county issued in 2014. Those 2014 obligations were applied by the county to refund some 2003 bonds that the county had issued for the benefit of Diakon, and that refinanced some additional earlier debt that had been issued for the benefit of Diakon. All of this debt, the original and the refinance debt, was applied to finance or refinance capital projects at 2 senior living campuses that Diakon owns that are referred to as the Ravenwood campus and the Robinwood campus. Under the federal tax code, local governments may issue tax-exempt conduit revenue bonds and loan the proceeds to nonprofit entities that are 501c3 organizations. If they're going to do that, before they do that, there must be held what is known as a TEFRA hearing, which is a public hearing that gives the public the opportunity to comment on the nature of the financing, the amount of debt to be issued, and the location of the projects. So if you would like, I can give you a brief overview of it. After the public hearing, there's a resolution that will be before you for your consideration. If you'd like, I can give you that overview of how the process will play out, and then you can open up the meeting to allow the public to speak if they wish to do so.
Public hearing after he does this. So you want us to go into public hearing now?
Yes, if you want me to give you an overview first, and then you can open up for the public hearing, or you can open up for the public
Overview
hearing, and
first.
afterwards I can give you an overview of the
Overview
resolution.
first, that's
Okay.
it. Thank you.
So, the 2014 revenue obligation that the county issued and loaned the proceeds of to Diacon is a variable rate instrument. So the interest rate moves up and down according to a formula. In this rising interest rate and volatile environment, Diacon has decided it would prefer to lock in its long-term debt for this purpose at a fixed rate. So it's looking to have fixed rate bonds issued for its benefit. So much like homeowners that have variable rate mortgages, in a rising interest rate environment, they may try to refinance to a fixed rate mortgage. This is a similar scenario. And so, assuming that the commissioners approve the resolution does certain things in accordance with the Maryland Economic Development Revenue Bond Act. It authorizes the county to issue one or more series of revenue obligations from time to time in a maximum principal amount not to exceed $17,500,000 and to loan the proceeds to Diacon. Diacon will use those proceeds to what's referred to as currently refund, which is another term for refinance, the outstanding 2014 C obligation that the county issued for its benefit, to pay costs of issuance of the transaction, to fund any reserves that are deemed necessary, such as a debt serve reserve fund, and to pay other costs or expenses that are authorized by the Maryland Economic Development Revenue Bond Act. That act requires that when a potential borrower would like a potential issuer, such as the county, to issue revenue debt, that the borrower submit a letter of intent describing the proposed transaction to the issuer. And a copy of that letter of intent that was delivered by Diacon is attached as Exhibit A to the resolution. Assuming you approve the resolution, then, the county will be authorized to issue not more than $17.5 million of revenue obligations. We assume that they will all be tax exempt if issued, but there's an ability to issue either tax exempt or taxable. The only reason that we would want to have the county issue taxable debt is there are certain tax code limitations on what tax exempt proceeds could be spent on, particularly the amount of the cost of issuance. So sometimes we have to issue what is known as a taxable tail, but all obligations together won't exceed $17.5 million. In accordance with the act, the authority is delegated to the president of the county commissioners, who is the chief executive for purposes of the act, to determine all the other final details of the financing by executive order or otherwise. This is standard practice for this type of transaction. In this case, Diacon is proposing that PNC Bank and Wells Fargo will serve as underwriters of the transaction. The bonds will actually be issued to the public, and those two entities will underwrite the bonds. Most importantly, these bonds will not be backed by a pledge of the full faith and credit or the taxing power of the county, unlike your general obligation debt. The obligation to pay debt service on the bonds runs solely to Diacon. If they don't pay, the county has no obligation, legal or moral, to do so, and that will be made very clear to the bondholders. The resolution authorizes the president of the board, the county administrator, and the chief financial officer, and it designates them as authorized officers for purposes of the bond documents. It's typical in these kinds of transactions that certain officials are given authority to make certain determinations on behalf of the county. There's no pecuniary liability to the county with respect to this proposed transaction. Diacon is responsible for paying all transaction costs, whether the bonds are ever issued or not, and that includes the fees of my firm. While we are bond counsel to the county, in this instance, we would be serving as issuers counsel, so I will be looking out to make sure that there are no obligations placed on the county under the documents that shouldn't be so placed. And Stevens and Lee, a Pennsylvania law firm, will give the bond counsel opinion in this transaction. And that's partly because Diacon is undertaking a related refinancing of some bonds that were issued for its benefit for other campuses in Pennsylvania. So these two transactions are running on a parallel track. If the resolution is approved, the bonds have to be issued within 1 year of the date of approval unless we come back to you at a later date and you extend that period. That is the sort of broad brush overview of what the resolution does, and I'm happy to answer any questions. And also, Scott Habecker, who is the Executive Vice President, the Chief Financial Officer and Chief Operating Officer for Diacon, is here, and he's available to answer questions if you have additional questions.
Sorry, I just have one quick question. I know that as being a revenue bond, there's no legal or implied payment from the county. But if for some reason there was a missed payment on that, could that affect our credit rating?
No, that should not affect your credit rating because the rating agencies also understand this is conduit revenue debt. You have not backed it at all.
Thank you.
So to kind of go along Commissioner Monschmidt's question, hypothetically, what would be a reason a municipality or county would vote no in a situation like this? Why? What's the downfall?
There are several reasons why an issuer would vote no. One is if the issuer was looking to issue debt in the same calendar year for its own purposes or for another 501c3 entity, and either the issuer or that other 501c3 entity had already approached it about making sure that debt could be issued as bank qualified debt, which means the total amount of certain types of tax-exempt debt, including qualified 501c3 bonds, issued by that issuer in that calendar year in question could not exceed $10 million. The county routinely issues more than $10 million for its own purposes, so Diacon understands it cannot get the benefit of bank qualified debt through the county. The other thing is just if the issuer just felt that issuing that debt for those purposes, for that borrower would not serve the public purposes of the legislative authorization.
You talked about it being done in a calendar year, so is this going to be approved for calendar year 18 or are you doing calendar 19?
We are actually looking at the bank qualification is tested only on a calendar year versus a fiscal year basis. Diacon is looking to issue the bonds. In fact, if you approve the transaction today, they are hoping to actually close on the bond issue on January 31, 2019.
Okay.
Anything else? Can we now enter into the call for the public hearing?
Absolutely.
Okay. Next on the agenda is a public hearing concerning the economic development refunding revenue bonds for the benefit of Diacon Lutheran Social Ministries and proposed resolution. The purpose of this hearing is to hear public testimony concerning the matter. The procedure is as follows. 1, we will have staff introduce the matter, after which the hearing will open for public comment and testimony. Each speaker will be giving a maximum of 3 minutes to testify. After everyone who wishes to speak has done so, the hearing will close. The commissioners may then discuss the issue and take any action they deem appropriate, including adoption or rejection of the proposal, or they may take the issue under advisement and deliberate at a later date. Mr. Downey, would you introduce the matter, or is that the? Or
I think Ms. Rader.
Okay.
Or Ms. Greaves.
We will now open the public hearing for comment after you introduce the matter.
Yeah, I think at this point, it's really the public have the opportunity to come forward and make any pronouncements or discuss anything they wish regarding the proposed maximum size of the issue and the location of the facilities or the nature of the financing.
Thank you for your in-depth discussion and introduction to this matter. We will now open the hearing for public comment. Anyone wishing to testify may now come forward. Do I have anyone wishing to testify? Seeing none, We will now move forward to the commissioners. Do you have, should we close it first? Or?
Close the public hearing.
Okay, we will now, thank you. We will now close the public hearing. Commissioners, do you have any comments, questions, or input? Please proceed. Anything?
Unless you have any questions, I think all you need is a motion either to, introduce and approve the resolution and a second if you're so inclined.
Commissioners? There's a motion to
introduce and
approve the
approve it.
resolution. A second? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Resolution, motion approved. Congratulations. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Mr. Downey.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Now, Sarah, looks like you're up next. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you can see I brought my whole binder, so. Okay.
Sarah, would you introduce the report?
Of course. Here I have, okay. All right, good morning, Commissioners. I'm here today to offer you a report on how we ended the fiscal year 2018. I will go ahead and move through this report, and then maybe I'll have some comments related to the upcoming budget, if that's all right. Okay, so first slide represents our final budget for the general fund. The final budget was $225.6 million. Total revenues did reach $223.9 million, while expenditures came in around $222.5. The good news is that we finished the year in a positive manner with a net change of $1.4 million, or 0.6% of our budget. Some of our major revenues are in front of you. Real property tax revenue, that represents about 50% of the general fund budget revenue. It did come in strong, a bit over what we anticipated by about $400,000. Unfortunately, you can see on the graph next to it for income tax that we did not experience the same result. Income tax was under budget by about $4 million. In addition, as you can see on the graph, we have experienced our first decline since about 2010 from actual to actual experience. So I have done some research gathering information for the income tax data. I've looked at some other jurisdictions comparing their figures to both what they received last year and their budgeted amounts for FY18. And unfortunately, there's not a clear, consistent pattern that I can draw from. So, some counties were up, some were down. It was not a comforting feeling for me to draw the conclusion that everyone had experienced the same result. I did review the number of tax filers for the calendar year 2017, and we have, it appears, seen an increase in the number of filers along with an increase in the adjusted gross income. So it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense why we experienced what we did for income tax. I have reached out to the state for some additional answers on this, so I am awaiting their reply to try to get some better explanation as to what's going
You
on.
would figure with unemployment low, we'd have more income tax.
Yeah, unemployment's low, tax filers were up, and adjusted gross income was
I
up. So,
welcome you exploring the state for some more explanation.
sure.
And we have more jobs in Washington County now than we had a year ago?
I don't have those statistics with me right now, Commissioner Baker.
I believe the unemployment percentage is the same as it was 12 months ago.
Yes.
All those jobs you've created over the last year.
Would it be possible, Sarah, to maybe see what our surrounding counties, even in Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Virginia, that have experience for income tax? So maybe we can see if it might be more regional.
I can try to do that. Yes, some of the counties don't release their financial statements until 12/31. So I will check those other jurisdictions and see what their time frame is to see if I can get some information on that.
To raise the income tax rate. Raise the income tax rate.
Okay. Other revenues that are important to the county, you'll see on the screen, personal property tax is your first graph. So we did experience an increase there by about $1 million.
In addition, recordation tax was over budget by about $700,000. So there were a few large commercial transactions which contributed to those increases. Recordation tax does fluctuate a bit from year to year, so we do normally budget around $6 million for that revenue. And we're happy when it comes in above, obviously when we have a shortfall somewhere else, which we had experienced in 2018. Oops, skipped over. Okay, slide 4, general fund expenditures. Here we see budget versus actual changes. Just like a home budget at the county, here we have our highs, we have our lows. As we saw on the first slide, when we opened up, we came in under budget, which provided for the slight increase in fund balance of $1.4 million.
Could you explain why the general operations was so much over budget?
That's actually under budget, so that's like showing that we're in the good. So I'm sorry if that was misrepresented in this graph. So what it shows here is anything above that zero line is how well we did as compared to budget, and then anything below the line is where we went over budget. General ops, we did better than budget related to some pension allocation that was in that general operations department. And that was related to having a beginning balance in our liability account. So we fared better than budget there. And the intergovernmental, that is related to some transfers that we made to the capital budget. We spoke about that a little bit before. Okay. The next slide is our solid waste highlights. Operating revenues were on target with budget, so that's the good news. We did have some expenditures that came in over budget. Leachate, as you can see, $439,000, and then post-closure costs of $480,000. The ending net position was $2.9 million, and the ending cash reserves was about $1 million. Fund balance and net position, as you see up there, pretty interchangeable terms. Fund balance is used generally for governmental funds, net assets for proprietary funds. And of course, as you are aware, we do use the assets that we acquire to provide the services that we provide. Understanding that a positive net position is a great thing, it's also important to understand why the cash reserves is such an important factor as well. Without cash reserves, we're unable to absorb costs that are over budget or to provide for additional expenditures that were unanticipated.
If I remember correctly, we renegotiated the leachate contract about a couple months ago.
I don't know. Go ahead.
Spirit Services. That was a contract with Spirit Services. So they do handle leachate among many other things. What we did do, and keeping a careful eye on leachate, given the rainfall this year, obviously it was up. We've adjusted the slopes, and Dave is here. We've been working over the last 6 months to adjust the slopes to shed more water off the landfill, which should save a great deal of money in the future year. So
yeah, so we're looking forward to that savings. The next slide is the water quality highlights. Again, operating revenues and expenditures were pretty on target with the budget. Connection fee revenue did come in a little bit higher than budgeted, which is great. This is another revenue stream that fluctuates greatly and is difficult to predict. The ending net position here is $139 million, but the ending cash reserves is only about $1.6 million. So that is definitely something to note for the commissioners. We're going to talk a little bit more about cash reserves as I continue the presentation. The next slide represents Cascade Town Center. Cascade had an ending fund balance for FY18 of $1.6 million. You can see the graph is showing a projection for the end of 2019. That takes into consideration how much fund balance we have in the budget to use for this current fiscal year. So overall, you can see the ending fund balance for 2019 is projected just a little bit over $500,000. And it is important to note that the annual budget for Cascade Town Center is around $1 million.
Just a quick question. That the $200,000 we kept, I think, from the broken deal with with the Cascade sale. Did that go to Cascade? Did that 200,000 go to Cascade?
To the fund?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Is part of the expense the rec center up there too?
Yes, part of the expense is that rec center, I think $170,000 appropriation a year. Mhm.
This is the last obligated year for that. However, we're trying to look into the future to see that that can be met somehow to some level in the future.
Thanks.
So with the Cascade Town Center Fund, seeing how in the next fiscal year we expect that to go into the red,
Yeah.
have we, I don't think we've decided as a group of commissioners, but do we need to decide how far we want that to go into the red, if we want it to go into the red at all? We're burning through that cash rather quickly.
We are. It appears that by the end of FY20, which is the budget that we have upcoming, we will have to supplant funds with maybe possibly general fund dollars.
That's what concerns me a little bit, because up to this point, the money that's being used for the efforts, the outreach, to try and attract business, that's been money that was transferred to us from Penmar.
That's correct.
Not necessarily out of our general revenue.
That's correct.
But next year,
Commissioner, that could be a good topic for next year for a agenda item and discussion. Would you?
I think we need to discuss that rather soon.
All right, Mr. Slick,
And-
put that on the future, please.
Yeah, I'm glad to report to you JGBLI will be coming in January to present to you with an
Okay.
update.
And with that fund, I would prefer to see a plan how we could make that, possibly make that $1 million extend another year. If we have to do some cost cutting, figure out some ways to generate some revenue, I think it's imperative that we avoid going into our general fund to offset cost up at Fort Ridgely.
Understood.
So I'd like to be able to take that.
That rec
$1 million
center is very important to the people up there, so.
Could we get
A discussion for next year?
We're in trouble up there.
Could we get a breakdown of the expenses, the $1 million, where that goes?
Sure. Would you like budget or actual?
Actual.
Mhm. Okay. Ending the presentation with cash reserves, information for especially new board members. Some of the current board may already know this. The general fund cash reserve policy does state that we should meet 17% of general fund revenues, representing about 60 days of working capital. The policy states for other funds that we should maintain 25% of the current year's budget appropriation for operation and maintenance costs, representing about 90 days of working capital. Adequate reserves are important for our rating agencies. The better the rating, the lower the interest rate on the bonds, and obviously the better rate we get, we save the county money. Up in front of you right now is cash reserves for June 30, 2018. As you can see on the first graph, we have the target reserve, which is the 25%. And then in the green, we have what our actual balance is for those respective funds. You can see the only one that's a little alarming would probably be sewer on this first graph, which is not currently meeting its target. On the graph next to it is just the information displayed differently, showing how under or over our cash reserves as compared to the target. For the next slide, we're showing cash reserves as a projection for June 30 of 2019. So there are several things that we do know. We know that for the FY19 budget, we plan to use $2.7 million in cash reserves for sewer. We know that we plan to use $440,000 in cash reserves for water. And we know we plan to use $463,000 in cash reserves for solid waste. Knowing this information, we've provided this graph for you so that you understand what may be coming for the end of June 30, 2019 as related to these funds.
Can I ask one more question? The 17% is imperative to keep the bond rating, correct?
Yes.
So the 17% reserve is 30-some million, correct?
39 million, 38 million.
And that's good for
something like
60, that'll last 60 days.
that. Yes, that's correct. The target's 38 million for the general fund. 17% is 38 million.
It would be not good to touch that 17%.
No, and it's actually advisable to increase that if you can. Some other counties have higher policy reserve requirements, and so we're always looking to do better than just the minimum.
Fair to say it serves two purposes. One is an insurance against any hazard in the short term in the future, and also to reduce costs for borrowing for the county.
Yeah,
For bond rating.
I think that that's definitely safe to say. Yes, if we wouldn't maintain our cash reserves, we would have a lower rating, and it would definitely affect our borrowing. Okay, so, all right. So we have begun, whoops, sorry. Oh, they're doing it. We have begun the budgetary process for both capital and operating budgets. We're going into the FY 2020 budget. I do have a handout. If I can give this to Kendall, maybe Kendall, you can at least just maybe pass it along. So the following handout is the budget message. We've conveyed this message both internally and to our external budget preparers. In summary, it speaks to the importance in holding the line on budget requests for FY 2020. So you can read through that. On the second page.
When are budget requests due by?
I'm sorry, what's that?
When are budget requests due by?
For the operating budget, they're due on January 11th. The capital budget is due by the end of this year, December 31st. The second page that you have shows kind of our most recent general fund budget history. And you can see that there was, a bit of a jump between the 18 and the 19 budget. Based on what economists are saying and, considering what we have going into FY 2020, we're not expecting that much of a jump. We're not expecting a 4 to 5% increase for the general fund. So all this graph is trying to show you is that we're anticipating just a minor increase for our 2020 budget. And then the third page that you have is because you will probably be receiving a host of requests for this budget season. I wanted to share this information with you related to funding mechanisms administered by the Office of Grant Management. I won't go over it today, but it's just information for you. It's a summary of the different programs that we have for ad hoc requests or anything that you may receive from either individuals or nonprofits.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Are there any questions?
None for me. Commissioners, any other questions? Rob, any other questions?
My comment is just to Sarah and the staff behind her. They've consistently been, as the audit said, consistent and accurate, and that is priceless, to put it in budget terms.
Thank you.
Thank you, and
Thank
Jim
you.
and Kelsey and
Yep.
the others, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up, Second Chance Grant. That's what I have. Oops, excuse me, Narcotics Task Force. Please forgive. Page ahead. Welcome.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm in front of you this morning to request a budget transfer to move revenue from our Sheriff Contraband Revenue Fund to the Contraband Miscellaneous Fund. I'm in front of you because the amount that I'm requesting to transfer is over the $25,000. It's actually $39,477.13.
Commissioners, comments? Any thoughts?
Motion to approve.
You read my mind. Do I hear a second? Second. All in favor, say aye. Aye, 5-0. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Next up, second chance grant.
Good morning,
Good
Commissioners.
morning,
Administration.
everyone.
I'm Stephanie Lapole, Senior Grant Manager, Office of Grant Management, and here with me today is Major Craig Rowe with Washington County Sheriff's Office and Director Rebecca Hogemeyer with Washington County Day Reporting Center. We are seeking approval for the acceptance of the subgrantee award for the Second Chance Grant and the amount as awarded by the Governor's Office of Crime Control and Prevention. The Governor's Office of Crime Control and Prevention has asked Washington County to act as a subgrantee for the Second Chance Grant. The goal of the award is to reduce the impact of incarceration on children, families, and communities by strengthening the relations between justice system-involved parents and their minor children. The objective is to implement Parenting Inside Out, an evidence-based cognitive behavioral parent management skills training program for incarcerated parents. Program services will be integrated into the existing Day Reporting Center. Parent-child interaction therapy will be implemented for children between ages 2 and 7 of incarcerated parents. Functional family therapy will be implemented for children ages 8 and older. The Office of Grant Management has reviewed the grant funding guidelines. Matching funds or in-kind support is not required, and there are no unusual conditions or requirements associated with the grant. If the grant funding ends, the program will no longer be continued. Please note that no county employees or positions will be funded through this grant. And the anticipated award amount is $370,092. Are there any questions?
Commissioners, thoughts, comments?
No match, or is it?
No, sir.
No match.
Motion to approve.
Second, there. First and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. 5-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up, if I'm not overlooking something, Washington County Fire and Rescue Insurance Renewal.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Tracy McCammon, Risk Coordinator, and I have Carlene Patterson with Aon Risk Solutions instead of Patrick Hancock.
Good morning.
Sorry, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Carlene Patterson. I'm with Aon, and I'm the National Public Sector Practice Leader. And Patrick resigned from Aon about a week ago, so thank you for allowing me to be here.
And we're here to do the Washington County Fire and Rescue Association insurance renewal that runs January 1 of 2019 to January 1 of 2020. The recommended motion is moved to renew the commercial property, auto, and casualty package with VFIS Insurance Company at the quoted premium of $324,596, and the workers' compensation insurance with Chesapeake Employers Insurance Company at the quoted premium of $624,963. Aon Risk Solutions marketed the insurance package. They received proposals from VFIS, the incumbent insurance company, and Emergency Service Insurance Program. The workers' compensation package was not marketed at this time. Due to the marketing of the insurance package, the insurance premium dramatically decreased. ESIP submitted a proposal for $354,803. VFIS submitted the lowest proposal of $324,596. The premium paid to VFIS for the 2018 policy year was $551,423. The premium cost savings is $226,827 for this package. The workers' compensation insurance premium for 2018 was $621,270. This is an increase in premium of $3,693. The total premium for both programs is $949,559, with a total savings in premiums of $223,134. We are definitely within our budget. VFIS does require a down payment of $82,125 that is due on January 1st of 2019, with the remaining balance being paid in 10 monthly installments. Chesapeake Employers Insurance also requires a down payment of $125,002 on January 1st. Again, the remaining balances will then be paid in 10 monthly installments. Concurrences is Dave Hayes, Director of Emergency Services, and Sarah Greaves, CFO. The alternatives would be to repeat the market bid. Any questions?
Commissioners, thoughts, comments?
How does I mean, why is there savings? Why it came in over $200,000 less? I mean, that's all I have is that page. This covers our volunteer companies also?
Yes. And because we went out for market bid, basically VFIS knew that we were going out for market bid, and they also knew that ESIP was presenting a proposal as well.
So is coverage decreased, or on the commercial side, I guess, is where
we actually did have a decrease in some of our claims as well, so that did play a factor in it. And of course, the other side is that, there was a little bit of competition.
Increase, but do we get the same amount of coverage?
Yes, same amount of coverage. Right, limits are the same.
How often do we take these bids out to market?
We didn't take them out to market for the last 2 years, only because in 2014, when the association had Selective as the insurance company, our claims were very, very high. Give it some time in order for those higher claims to not be counted, because when you go out to bid, usually they look at the last 4 to 5 years of your claims history. So we were kind of waiting for those to fall off.
Who reviews the deductibles, and who polices that? Like $1 million fire truck, how much deductible if we destroy this fire? Who's the one that looks through the policy and compares apples to apples? And
Aon and I both do.
For example, Boonesboro had an incident where they rolled their tanker, didn't have full coverage on it. Does that cover?
Yeah, is this full coverage?
Is this part of that?
Well, we are actually working on a matrix, so to speak, for our fire and rescue vehicles. I know Dave is part of that discussion, but right now, most of the vehicles that are on the insurance policy is at full value.
Since a significant number of pieces of equipment that we are insuring comes under volunteer fire and rescue, I see we have a few folks from fire and rescue. Mr. Blair and Mr. Moncrief. Any thoughts from your end? Has this been something that's gone through the association?
We haven't passed, it hasn't been passed by the association yet. It just came up rather shortly on short notice. We couldn't keep up with it.
Any indication as to their approval?
I think there will be approval. It's, would be foolish not to approve it. And I'm sure we can't afford to go back to anything that says 100% vehicle replacement for 20 years. I mean, the policy would be totally out of whack.
Commissioners, Director Hayes is here as well as President.
Does Mr. Blair have any comments?
Now, President Blair is here as well. So.
Actually, some of the departments are complaining in reference to the procedure that was taken to get to this point. I don't know the particulars. All I do is, all I'm aware of, there's a number of companies out there complaining.
So is this something we should probably take back to the companies and let the presidents of the companies and their boards, do they have executive boards?
I would say something in that order.
And make sure they're satisfied.
In reference to the insurance policy.
Yeah.
That's what I want to do.
are we saying that the companies themselves? I mean, who reviews this? Is the companies each? Dave Hayes, do you review this?
If I might, I think I can add a couple points of clarity here. So, probably 20 years ago, the commissioners decided to fund the vehicle property casualty insurances for the volunteer companies. Some years back, and I can't give you a number, my understanding was it used to be a guaranteed replacement policy, and at some point in the probably last 10 to 15 years or so, it was switched to an agreed upon policy. So what happened through the renewal, and we come up on the renewal cycles, Tracy had contacted me and asked me to take a look at the spreadsheet, the vehicle spreadsheet. There's probably somewhere between 100 and 150 assets that are insured on the policy. So what I quickly discovered is every company was not insured the same. Of no fault of Tracy or any previous administrations, it's just strictly left up to 26 fire chiefs or departments to declare what vehicles need to be insured and at what value. So as an example, and this is not to target any company, but I'll use an example. We had a 1991 Dodge pickup 3500 insured for $90,000. I don't know anybody that would personally insure a 1991 Dodge pickup, even for $40,000, much less 90. So there's some things that have been lost in translation over the years as chiefs change, as we've changed policy administrators, and again, of no fault or failure, it's just the way the program has been coming forward. So we have an inland marine portion of this policy that covers all portable equipment. So the reason that a chief declared $90,000 for a 1991 Dodge truck is because it's a brush unit and it has what's called a skid unit that would go in the back of that truck that carries the tank, the pump, the reel and stuff. It's considered portable, so it's actually covered under the inland marine policy. So what we discovered is we're paying a premium for an inland marine policy, and because some of the fire chiefs may or may not be aware that that's where that should be placed, we're also listing that as an insured value on the vehicle asset inventory. So as an example, we started out at about $31 million worth of insured assets for vehicles. We're down to, I think the most recent revision, to about 23 or $24 million. So we were overstatedly insured because of basically it's a subjective analysis. So I'll call in and say I bought a 1995 pumper, and Tracy's question would be, what should we insure it for? And that's the agreed upon value. Some of those departments have stated $300,000, some have stated $500,000, and some have stated $150,000. So what we're working towards is to come up with what should we insure a particular asset class for. So let's talk about a fire engine, the one that most people can associate with. We know as a county we can buy that fire truck for probably $500,000, but we're using $550,000 as that claimant, so that every piece of apparatus in every department would know that they are appropriately insured up to $550,000 for their asset. Now, it's my opinion that we should insure based on need, not necessarily want. So if we know that we could buy a county fire truck for $500,000, to me, that's the benchmark. That's where we set the standard at. And then we look at how can we insure anything that costs more than that. As an example, one fire chief gave me his quote for his particular fire truck included all of the portable equipment on it. So when he listed $624,000, it was the $500 and some dollar value of the actual apparatus plus the portable equipment. So there was no matrix that allowed us to declare exactly what we should have insuring a piece of apparatus for. So when we went through this policy, and to answer some of the comments about why such a reduction in premium, we were able to better clarify assets, meaning should they be on, should they not. Utility vehicles like the ATV type stuff, they were listed on the vehicle policy, but after a review of our policy with Patrick, who has since left, we found that they are actually covered under the inland marine policy. A lot of these are newer vehicles insured at $25,000, again, on the vehicle policy, but it belongs on the inland marine policy. The trailer it rides on belongs on the vehicle policy. So we're trying to clean up and work through and establish parameters that we can manage this program and be good stewards to the taxpayer and the Board of County Commissioners who ultimately have to approve this. But that's a lot of the background. I did brief this last month at the Volunteer Fire and Rescue Association meeting, but we are in a short window because of renewals. I plan on going Thursday evening. What I've done is, and we're prepared to distribute the matrix so that they can clearly see it. The one I handed out last month, they couldn't read. I tried to help the print and actually heard it. The other thing we're doing is looking at age of vehicles. So again, you get into a vehicle, the county is not in a position to afford a guaranteed replacement policy, as I think many departments would like to have. So in response to that, what we've tried to say was, okay, for that same fire truck I just spoke to, we've developed an asset class matrix that says for the first 10 years, we're going to make sure that it's insured at an appropriate value that could buy you its replacement. So if it's $550,000 going forward for the first 10 years, it would be insured at $550,000, or at each premium renewal, we would readjust that for inflation. So next year it could be 575 or 650, and your insured asset would increase with that. And at 10 years, we decrease it by 50%. We do the same with cars, but on a much shorter cycle. So the first 6 years, we insure it for 100% of its replacement value. At 6 years, it goes to 50%. And then at 15 years, it drops off and we insure it for liability only. And that's much how I think most of us probably manage our personal vehicle policies. So some of those smaller, less expensive products, we've worked to build some type of standardized approach so we know what we're going to insure it for. And again, in my opinion, to the citizens, we can say that we're being good stewards of the program, which is what I think it's intended to do.
In your opinion, are you accurate now? Is the inventory accurate? Is the values accurate? I mean,
very
it
close.
sounded like it wasn't accurate before.
Exactly.
But you're convinced that all your...
Right. We had, again, going to that engine class because it's the most prominent number of vehicles we've got. We had vehicles at the same age, one insured for 500 and one insured for 300,000. So the companies aren't equally insured. What we're trying to drive into this is some type of standardized matrix that says this is the number, this is what we will fund. And this can even go into other programs to say we're going to fund the base part of the system, but if you want things above and beyond that, then that's what you need to go and maybe have a bingo or other fundraising activities, not trying to take their autonomy away and the ability to buy what they want. We're only trying to make sure we have appropriately cost control measures in place for the part that the taxpayer has to be responsible for and pay for.
So what is the I guess the rumors or complaints that about doing this renewal? And then the second question is, if we don't do this renewal, I know it says repeat of market bids, but are we going to be insured over this time frame?
What's the coverage period?
We're insured until January 1st.
It expires at 12:01 a.m. midnight. And as far as your question, Commissioner, about remarketing, there's only a certain number of carriers that actually cover volunteer fire and rescue. 2 of them actually quoted for your renewal, VFIS and ESIP. And so, really what it comes down to is what we've already done, which is correct the values and get them into the right places. And so from a marketing standpoint, I don't expect that if we went back out that you would see any difference because the values have been shifted around to the different buckets already.
And I thank you for all that work. If correcting it benefit the taxpayers, it's thank you.
All right, so what I'm hearing, we have an end of coverage date. Go ahead.
You had mentioned guaranteed replacement policy. So when you go out to a company and you're trying to get a value on their equipment out there, a volunteer company, you get a value on their engine, fire engine. So if it has a value at that time of $250,000, that's all we're going to insure that vehicle for?
So the guaranteed replacement, and correct me if I'm wrong, somebody that may be better versed in insurance than I, but a guaranteed replacement coverage, the way I understand it, is if you were to have a 1995 fire truck that you might have paid $200,000 for in 1995, you were to total that vehicle in 2018 or 19, and it cost $600,000 to replace it, that is the number that would be paid to replace that vehicle, regardless of its age. Ours is an agreed upon policy and was changed to that to where it would be a declared value at the time, at any given time, and that would be its life, its insurance value for the rest of its life. Now, some departments, when they purchased a vehicle, overstated the value. At least that's my expectation, or what I think I see, to make sure that as time went on, and they knew that inflation would catch up, that they would still, in say 10 years, have enough declared value that if they totaled that vehicle in 10 years, they could still buy a brand new truck, including inflation. My proposal, what I would advocate we look at, is similar to that, but we control the adjustment to make sure that every department's vehicle is adjusted and every department has an insured value that should get them close to replacing maybe not the exact same vehicle that had all the bells and whistles on it, but a vehicle that could do the job and do the job respectfully, and that's really what we're trying to drive to. And again, if you want to buy that vehicle, we're not saying you can't. We're only saying this is the dollar we'll insure it for. You need to figure out the delta between those two. You may decide that you want to self-insure something above this from the cost savings. I don't know. That's another conversation. But really, if you look at this, if you look at this spreadsheet, there again are 100 or 150 different assets in here, and they're all over the place in the dollar values, even for light vehicles.
You stated earlier that you could buy it, and I don't know the cost of a fire truck, but you're saying you could buy a fire truck for $500,000?
Yeah, we know today, based on what Hagerstown just moved through an RFP to purchase and has an extended contract, they're right at $500,000. We have a county bid spec developed if we move on the reserve fleet, and based on what we believe that's going to come in, we think that's 510, 515. So we actually went a little north of that, and we put 550 on it to make sure that we weren't just trying to force somebody into
all
a
the
bid.
companies, and I guess it depends on the value of the truck that they wreck at the time, could possibly get up to $550,000 to replace a fire truck.
If the vehicle's under 10 years of age. If it's over 10 years of age, it would be, it'd be 50% of that value. So it'd be $225,000.
How many fire trucks do we have in Washington County valued over $500,000? Are there several, many?
There's a good many. I don't have that exact number, but I can get it to you.
Commissioners, what I'm hearing, we have 13 days then of a coverage period. Do we want to move forward with a vote with this, or what's your pleasure? If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve towards discussion.
For whatever it's worth, Commissioners, I know in some discussion with Dave, he has tried to take a cost-effective approach and a thorough review of this to meet what one may expect to do with their own budget if it was our own money. So it does seem appropriate for whatever that may be worth.
I know I would feel like we're putting the commissioners between a rock and a hard place of having to approve this, on last minute. I would hope that next year, when this comes up, that we could get this information much earlier, saying, hey, what the vehicles are at, what, actually looking at the details that you spend all the time doing. But I think, as the commissioners here, we're in charge of the money. We want to make sure it's been spent properly and that the insurance coverage is done properly. And I'm sure the volunteer fire departments would also, like to take a look at that also. And I'm not, saying you did anything malicious or anything like that, but I just think for everybody taking a look at it being open to the public, I think would be in the best interest.
Right. I'm in favor to move forward today. I think the worst thing we could do is not have insurance January 1st or 2nd. I appreciate staff. I think staff acted in the direction that they've been given for quite some time now, is to try and cut costs but ensure adequate needs are being met. And I think that's what you did here. So absolutely thank you for that. I'd like to
Make that as a motion?
That would be a motion. And I'd like to hear if there's any feedback on Thursday at the association meeting.
I have a motion and a second for discussion.
I will second it. And where's the meeting on Thursday?
It's going to be at Morgansville.
Okay,
And I just for clarity, cleared with the Aon rep, that if this became something that was problematic after the 1st, we can amend this policy and go back and move the numbers if we had
Willingness to amend. Okay.
Yeah, it's a matter of values. And I
So
think
after
just to
first-
kind of clarify your question with regard to guaranteed value, when you insure your vehicles, it's actual cash value. And so you have a 19 or 2001, whatever it is, today's the actual cash value, that's what your insurance company will replace it with. It's if you went out and bought that exact vehicle today, how much would it be? And so the difference here is that it's based on basically replacement costs. How can you replace it? And so what we've done is taken out the subjectivity of, this is what we'd like to have to be able to replace it with something that's much more objective, because we know what we can get in the marketplace if a vehicle was completely destroyed.
Are you hearing any more discussion?
So you'll bring it up, how will you bring that up at Thursday's meeting, Bob?
Oh, I'm sorry.
We've already discussed this slightly, we're going to go back over it again.
You'll put it on the agenda. Okay. All right, sorry, then I didn't mean.
No, that's
I'm just glad somebody's being diligent. I mean, it seems like we weren't up to this point in accuracies.
And
So-
to address Mr. Smith, or Commissioner Smith's concern about next year, this isn't a one and done, but the size of this is a one and done. So this is a major look at this policy and what I would call a runaway freight train. It's basically somebody, 26 different people over the years declaring values, and it's not, again, they don't know. So it's she's exactly right. Our intent is to put a subject or an objective measurement in front of them that we know that that's what this vehicle should cost. And
The important thing is, you said amendments can be made.
Yeah. And I thank you for the work.
We have a first and a second on the floor. Motion to approve. Excuse me, call to vote. Or you got the first and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. 5-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, leave balance.
Thank you, President Klein. I'll make this quick. We do.
And to note, we shortly depart for Southern Boulevard.
Yes, sir. Celebration to commence on Southern Boulevard and our friends out there in Funkstown and beyond. Leave balance, Commissioner, the leave balance policy limits to 200 hours. The standard year-end review that I've conducted leaves 172 staff members above that 200 hours. And while there will be fluctuations in the remaining portion of the year, both through accruals and usage, that is 172 staff members, and you can see the range is quite wide as to some are over 300, but the average is close to probably on average about 250, 260 where some of the employees reside. Last year, the commissioners did approve because of extenuating circumstances, 250 hours. This year, we have had the second wettest year on record. We did have the South County experience. We've also already had a single snowstorm. My message in this is simply that you, contrary to some perceptions or beliefs, you have a very dedicated county staff that has lost some of their own time, and this is just documented vacation time that they're willing to sacrifice for the county. They've also spent evenings and weekends to serve the county. So I simply wanted to applaud them, wish them a great deal of rest, relaxation, and a safe and happy holiday season. And ask if the commissioners would consider 50 hours above the 250 limit for this year.
How many hours above the 200?
50 hours above, that they would not lose. It would not be reimbursed whatsoever. It's simply that they would not lose.
Period.
And vacation time does not go to retirement, so that
How many employees are we talking about? How many employees do you know, approximately?
As of when this report was run late last week, it was 172 employees. My reaction would be to cost effectiveness is that morale and appreciation for the employees that are about to lose time.
You okay with it? Yeah. The only other thing, this varies off our policy, correct?
It does. And it's
The only
only for this
objection
year.
I've heard or criticism was some employees would like more than advance notice. Is this any way this would be incorporated into our policy next year as a conversation?
We can certainly bring it up early next
So that
year as a.
so some know better
Yes,
how to
notice.
manage their time
Yes.
and things like that.
And I
You have 200 hours available, they've done a pretty good job.
Yeah. So,
There's no buyback, or they can't, okay.
No.
Perfect.
is there a motion to approve this?
Affects employees all the way from bottom to top.
Absolutely, yes, sir. And we're side to side, not bottom to top.
I understand.
Yep.
A motion to approve this?
I motion to approve it.
And a second? All in favor? Say aye. Aye. Thank you.
Thank you. And for those that don't already know, I know all of you do, that we have a celebration for opening Southern Boulevard, and it'll be for the
30
holidays.
minutes.
That will be on Oak, it says Oak Ridge, so it's circled Oak Ridge, not Frederick Street.
It's at the Circle at Oak Ridge. Yes.
Meadows. Ice
Yes,
cream.
by Meadows.
Yep.
Yes.
Free unsponsored commercial.
What's Meadows?
Meadows ice cream. All right, we have one more thing. I believe it's your report of boards and commissions that the commissioners have assigned themselves.
Yes, sir. We would like to, with the incoming two new commissioners, we
discuss are the Hagerstown Eastern Panhandle Metro Commission, the I-81 Corridor Coalition, Public Golf Corporation for Black Rock, and the Commission for Women. Currently, we have President Klein assigned to the Agricultural Education Center Board, Commission on Aging, Historic District Commission, Local Management Board, Mental Health Authority, Transportation Advisory Commission, the Tri-County Council Revolving Loan, and the Western Maryland Consortium. We have Vice President Baker assigned to the Area Agency on Aging, the Community Action Council, Recreation and Parks Advisory Board, Tri-County Council.
I don't want Tri-County Council.
I'll take that one.
Yeah, I think Court wanted that.
Oh, he is on there.
You're on the revolving loan there too.
Yeah, I'll take the other one, that's fine.
You want both?
Okay. Both are good committees.
For Vice President Baker, we also have the Western Maryland Consortium as a second designee, and the weed control. For Commissioner Kiefer, we have the Diversity and Inclusion Committee, Historical Advisory Committee, Housing Authority, Social Services Board, and the Tri-County Council. For Commissioner Meinl-Schmidt, we have the Disabilities Advisory Committee, which is yet to be completely formed. That's in the process of reviewing bylaws, which will be presented to the commissioners at a later
With
date.
clarity, Court took which committee on Tri-County Council?
I'm on both now.
Okay, so Wayne took a Tri-County, there's only,
Tri-County Council for Western
okay,
Maryland, they
there's two.
both have
There's
designees.
two for the board and then one for revolving.
They have two for revolving.
They
You
have
needed
two
a
for
backup.
revolving?
Mhm. Your president, and then a backup.
Okay, that's good. That's for the regular.
Oh, I see it, okay.
So for Commissioner Meinl-Schmidt, we have the Disabilities Advisory Commission, the MACO Legislative Committee, the Tri-County Council for Western Maryland, and the Tri-County Council Revolving Loan Fund. For Commissioner Wagner, we have the Agricultural Land Preservation Board, the Emergency Services Advisory Council, the Airport Advisory Committee, the Health Advisory Board, and the Planning Commission.
I asked Krista to confirm the accuracy of the meeting times and dates to get them to us.
I will also take, because I know we have a couple left over, I'll take
took
the
it.
Hagerstown Eastern Panhandle Metro.
You took it, I don't have any choice.
Yeah, I'd
We can
take,
share, tell them we'll share it.
Women's Commission.
I didn't hear you.
Tempo Court, that's ones, if you're not available, we can.
We don't, yeah,
We can rotate.
yeah, or we
Yeah,
can,
we,
we have time to
one
think about
can't
the ones.
make one, you're more than welcome to call another commissioner and see what we can do.
So we have the Public Golf Corporation and the I-81 corridor.
What about, I see the Health Advisory Board, that's the new board we created for the Health Department, right?
Yes,
What about Environmental Services? That was a new board we created.
that doesn't require commissioner presence.
Yeah, I took the Health Advisory.
And that's the one we're currently, or no, that's the one we just did, yeah. The disabilities we're working on.
All right.
So we're just looking for the 81 corridor and the public golf?
Correct.
I'll take the I-81 corridor also.